In early 1944, war photographers in Italy stumbled upon an incredible sight. The Allies were fighting to push their way up the boot of Italy and capture Rome. Soldiers from many different countries served on this front: Americans, British, and Canadians. But the photographers were struck by one unit of Polish artillerymen. During the Battle of Monte Cassino, the reporters caught sight of a bear, not in the woods but in the ranks, fighting alongside the Polish soldiers. He was carrying artillery shells and ammo crates. The men seemed to treat him as one of their own. As the reporters would learn, that's because he was one of their own. The bear was an official member of the Polish army with his own service number and everything. In fact, he even received a promotion, which meant that he outranked most of the other soldiers. Pictures of this fighting bear captured the imagination and gave birth to a legend. His name was Wojtek, and the story of how he ended up fighting in World War II is both heartwarming and heroic. But as we'll see at the end of the story, Wojtek didn't necessarily get the happy ending he deserved. This is the story of World War II's furriest hero. Our story begins on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland, beginning World War II in Europe. The attack came from the north and the west. Although the Polish army fought valiantly against the invaders, they were no match for the German war machine. Within a few weeks, the Poles were on the brink of defeat. Then, the situation went from desperate to disastrous. On September 17th, the Soviets joined the Germans, invading Poland from the east. They claimed they were standing up for Poland and protecting their own borders. But in fact, the Soviets and Germans had formed a secret pact. They had agreed in advance to divide Poland between themselves. Much like the Germans, the Soviets wanted to destroy any sense of Polish nationhood. They rounded up and massacred thousands of aristocrats, politicians, academics, and clergy. Anyone who might be able to organize and lead a resistance. The Soviets also took over 400,000 Poles prisoner and sent them to work camps in Siberia. Among these 400,000 were the men who would eventually go on to fight the Germans side by side with Wojtek the Bear. The pact between the Soviets and Germans included a 5-year non-aggression pact. Stalin wanted the Germans to exhaust themselves fighting against the French and British, and then he could deal with whoever survived. But the peace treaty fell apart on June 22, 1941. On that day, Hitler launched the largest land invasion in the history of the world, Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. That was bad news for almost everyone involved. The fight would destroy large swaths of Russia and Germany and result in the death of tens of millions of people. But at the time, it was good news for the Poles, who were still held in captivity. Enraged by Hitler's betrayal, Stalin retaliated by ordering the release of all the Polish soldiers he'd taken prisoner back in 1939. They would be allowed to form their own force and make their way to the west to fight against Germany. In the spring of 1942, this newly formed Free Polish Army began to assemble. Composed of men who survived Stalin's gulags, it was known as Anders' Army, after its commander, Władysław Anders. Anders led his men south out of the Soviet Union and into Iran. The plan was to march overland through the Middle East and join the fight against the Germans in North Africa. But Anders' army wasn't alone. With them came thousands of Polish civilians who had suffered 3 years in the gulags. Men and women, children, and elderly. These people were finally free, but they had no home to go to and many thousands of miles to walk. That explains what happened next. On April 8, 1942, Anders' army was trudging its way through Iran. A group of Polish soldiers happened upon a young Iranian boy who had a strange companion, a baby bear. The boy told the soldiers that the bear cub was orphaned. He'd saved it after its mother was shot by hunters. One of the Polish refugees, an 18-year-old girl named Irina, fell in love with the cub on sight and urged a lieutenant to buy him from the boy. The lieutenant gave in and bought the bear. The cub was taken to a Polish refugee camp near Tehran. For the next 3 months, this is where the bear grew up. He must have been a pleasant distraction for the refugees, a source of affection and amusement. Eventually, someone got the idea that the bear might be happier among the soldiers. He might even prove useful in the fight to come. So the bear was donated to the Polish 2nd Transport Company, which later became the 22nd Artillery Supply Company. The soldiers quickly warmed up to the young bear and his friendly, outgoing personality. Having been raised and socialized among humans, he fit right in with them. The soldiers decided to name him Wojtek, which is the short form of an Old Slavic name, Wojciech, meaning happy warrior. At this point, Wojtek was basically a mascot. There's nothing too unusual about that. However, he would become more than just a figurehead, and his feats would make him easily the most famous animal in World War II. For the time being, this makeshift military wasn't equipped to care for bears. Wojtek initially had some complications adjusting to life in a human army. Mainly, he had problems eating. The men started out feeding him condensed milk through a vodka bottle, but Wojtek couldn't swallow it properly. Subsequently, he was given fruit, marmalade, honey, and syrup. He appeared to be much happier with this richer diet. He was also often rewarded with beer, which quickly became his favorite drink. Later on, he was also seen enjoying smoking, or more eating, cigarettes. Generally, he would take a few puffs and then swallow the rest. Wojtek also took up the human habit of drinking coffee in the morning. On cold nights, Wojtek cuddled up with the other soldiers. He was known to snuggle with men who were ill or cold in order to keep them warm. During the day, he enjoyed playful wrestling with the soldiers, although not everyone was brave enough to tussle with him, especially when he started getting bigger. It was always lighthearted though, and aside from a few scratches, he never hurt his friends. The soldiers took Wojtek under their wing. It didn't seem to matter to the other men that he wasn't exactly your typical soldier. Despite having claws and a fluffy tail, they still treated him like family. They constantly spent time with him, teaching him how to do things like salute when greeted. He was excellent at mimicking the soldiers' behaviors, which is how he learned to drink beer from the bottle and smoke. He even learned to march in formation alongside them on his hind legs. Wojtek was a well-known attraction to not only the soldiers but the civilians as well. Many saw him as the unofficial mascot for all the nearby stations. Wojtek moved with the 22nd Transport Company, first through Iraq, then later through Syria, Palestine, and Egypt. Throughout this long journey, he quickly grew up. Although Syrian brown bears, which is what Wojtek was, are a smaller species, they can still grow up to about 4.5 feet long from nose to tail, and weigh up to 550 pounds. By the time of the Battle of Monte Cassino in 1944, Wojtek weighed around 200 pounds. As the bear and his comrades marched towards the front, he began to demonstrate his genuine usefulness. Late one night, while the Polish army was in Palestine, a thief crept into the camp. Everyone was asleep, but the footsteps woke up Wojtek. Concerned for the safety of his friends, the bear got up to investigate. He caught sight of the thief and started making his way towards him. Horrified, the intruder stumbled to retreat. But he made so much noise in doing so that he woke up the sleeping soldiers and was quickly apprehended. To thank Wojtek for his service, he was gifted a bottle of beer. But shortly thereafter, the soldiers faced the very real possibility that Wojtek would be stolen away from them. From Egypt, the Polish 2nd Corps were reassigned to fight alongside the British 8th Army as it invaded Italy. Wojtek would not be allowed to come to Italy and the soldiers would have to abandon him in Egypt. This was because of British Army rules. The Poles would have to board British transports in order to reach Italy, and the by-the-book Brits refused to transport pets, mascots, or any animal that wasn't essential to the war effort. Poor Wojtek seemed destined to be orphaned for a second time. Thankfully, someone in the Polish army came up with a genius solution. The soldiers lobbied the officers to officially enlist Wojtek and make him a Polish soldier. Amazingly, this was done. Wojtek the Bear was inducted into the Free Polish Army with the rank of private. His name was listed among the soldiers of the 22nd Artillery Supply Company so that he would be allowed to cross into Italy. He was also assigned 2 caretakers to make sure that all of his needs were met. As an enlisted member of the army, Wojtek had his own paybook, rank, and serial number. He also lived with his fellow soldiers in tents or in a special wooden crate. And just like his human comrades, Wojtek would now face off against the deadly German army in a desperate fight for the future of Europe. From January 17th to May 18th, 1944, the Allies fought the Battle of Monte Cassino, also known as the Battle for Rome. Having landed in Italy, the Allies were trying to drive up the boot and liberate the country from fascism. However, they were facing elite German troops, all well-armed, dug in, and determined to resist to the death. The Allied goal was to break through a series of fortifications known as the Winter Line. The Allies believed that breaking through the line near a rocky hill known as Monte Cassino would give them a clear shot to seize the city of Rome. Wojtek and his Polish friends were heavily involved in this fight. The final attack was to be carried out on May 16th by the Polish army. During this attack, one of Wojtek's caregivers was serving as an artillery spotter and he had to pull ahead, leaving Wojtek behind. Surrounded by his other fellow soldiers, all armed with guns, Wojtek wasn't going to just stand around. He started mimicking the soldiers as he often did, picking up massive crates of ammunition and hauling them to the cannons. These crates held 25-pound artillery shells and overall weighed about 100 pounds each. This was usually a 4-man job, but Wojtek did it himself with ease. Despite being just a bear, Wojtek's great strength and great love for his friends led him to become a real soldier. It was during this action that Wojtek was spotted by Allied photographers and became something of a celebrity. By the time the Battle of Monte Cassino was over, around 70,000 people on both sides had lost their lives. When everything settled, the troops were able to finally rest, and word about what Wojtek did for his companions quickly spread. His loyalty and fearlessness in the heat of battle made him a hero. His service for his country earned him a promotion to the rank of corporal. Along with this promotion, the 22nd Company also made a depiction of a bear carrying an artillery shell their official seal. The new logo was stamped on vehicles, uniforms, and the like. At the end of World War II, in 1945, the 22nd Transport Company moved to Berwickshire, Scotland. Wojtek went there with them. They were stationed at Winfield Airfield on a farm near the village of Hutton. Wojtek once again quickly won over the locals. He became an honorary member of the Polish-Scottish Association. By November 1947, all of the soldiers Wojtek had served with were being restationed or sent home. It was an emotional goodbye after all of the time they had spent together. This led to the question of what to do with Wojtek. After everything, they couldn't just release him into the wild or abandon him. They couldn't send him to Poland either. In the wake of the war, the rest of Poland had been liberated by the Soviets, who quickly turned it into a communist puppet state. After fighting and bleeding for their country, many of Wojtek's friends could never go home again, and they feared that if Wojtek was sent back to Poland, he would be seized by the communists and used as a propaganda piece. And so the decision was made that Wojtek would retire to the Edinburgh Zoo. Here he spent the rest of his days. He lived here comfortably while enjoying being treated as a celebrity. The media loved him. He was included in interviews and appeared on a local children's show from time to time. The Polish soldiers he served with also visited him as often as they could. Wojtek never forgot them and always remembered the faces of the men he'd served with when they came to see him. His former comrades often threw packages of cigarettes to him or tried to share beers. Wojtek was never forgotten, and he never wanted for anything. But it is somewhat sad to think that after fighting for freedom, he had to end his days in captivity. On December 2nd, 1963, Wojtek died at the age of 21. Years later, he is still remembered for both his courage throughout the war and his friendly spirit. Today, there are still monuments in both Poland and the UK that preserve the memory of Wojtek and his heroic acts. It's a story that bears repeating. So what do you think about Wojtek? Would you want a bear to fight by your side in war? Let us know down in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to History Snob for more historical content.